So this is tying into Cassie's earlier conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And Cassie, I loved your talk earlier on. As a founder of a holiday rental company, I think a lot of the things that you mentioned really resonated. One of those points you mentioned was around not trying to please everyone. And a chap I was in business with a while back, he used to always talk about not reverting to the mean, just do what everyone else is doing. And my question for you was really around social media, and that sort of telling the story, brand development of what we're trying to do at Curious Retreats. But we always talk about the story and how we position ourselves. And it does feel as though social media, whether that's just static images or whether that's video, is becoming the thing that every single person does. And sometimes it feels very much a gamification of the algorithms. And I wonder whether you had a view as to whether there's a world that exists in terms of a brand story without social media, or is it something that you feel as though we as a business and an industry has to double down even more on?
I hate social media. I hate social media. When I first started, Facebook hadn't even been launched. And so there was always the challenge of how do you reach the customer? And so, but then when Facebook did come out and we all started adopting it, those first adopters, we had such a privilege. We were able to get in front of people, to keep the conversations going, to create that fear of missing out kind of thing going on. And it was brilliant for a while. But now it's just become such a noisy space. And it's so difficult to stand out in that space. And also those algorithms are changing all the times. As we said earlier, there's so many different platforms now. They're all got different demographics on each of them. Trying to keep up with this is exhausting. And if we make our businesses just about how do we game the algorithm, then we're losing focus on actually what's important. So I think, and I'm being optimistic perhaps, but I have kids, Gen Z kids, that are really anti this stuff. They're obviously on their social media the whole time, but they're very much aware of actually, I need to put that down. And actually there is the real world that I really want to engage with. And I've got kids, they're getting into, not just vinyl, vinyl's expensive, but they're getting into CDs and they're getting into DVDs, going to the pub. Actually, I think there's an optimistic view of this is actually, all of this was novelty and people loved it and we embraced it, but I think it's swinging back the other way. And I think that's the opportunity for our industry, that actually we really are that place for humans to be humans and to have, and we're a face-to-face industry. And so I think it is a challenge, hugely, but I also think that because of the way it's developed, that actually there is another side to that, which is telling your stories, using it's a tool, but actually owning your own data as well. And actually that email and being able to have those personal conversations with people and keeping those conversations going yourself, rather than allowing those social media tools to basically dictate to you how you operate.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you very much. David, Joe mentioned the visitor. Joe mentioned the visitor levy.
Yeah.
And there's a risk that it will come if we get a mayor, when we get a mayor. What is your view of your own personal view versus the data? And do you think that the funds could be a cause for good?
I think we all operate in an area where there are lots of infrastructure challenges with regards to tourism. So if that levy was to be put to a good use, where in our area things like transportation, people getting round in an environmentally friendly way, people finding and accessing us, it could have huge benefits. I don't think it's something that consumers are necessarily, or visitors are completely unaware of. It's not unusual when you go to a European country, all of those levies are in place if applied in a reasonable way. But let's face it, everybody's prices are going up. We get feedback on our guest reviews all the time. I paid £285 for this stay, etc., etc., etc. They're very aware of that, and that's just another cost that may well put people off. But it's about protecting that investment and seeing whether actually, particularly where we operate, whether we could actually make things better.
Okay, so Ben, 65% of the business in the survey increased their prices. David's just talked about price sensitivity. 55% plan to increase their prices again this year. Now, of course, some of that's inflationary, so the answer probably is going to be yes. But is there a limit, based upon the sensitivity we're seeing, of how many more times we can keep putting the prices up to cover some of the increased costs we're facing?
Yeah, I think everyone's got a finite amount of disposable cash, and Pensthorpe is a prime example of maybe doing things differently. We've actually put our prices down this year, which is quite controversial, and it's the reason why it took us 8 months to work out our budget this year, because it was so challenging to make those numbers stack up. But we're really conscious that people are being asked to left enter more money, more things to do. So I don't think you can just keep putting an extra pound on each year as probably once upon a time you would have done. However, the challenging part of that is people still expect more investment, more to do when they're visiting these spaces. It's really hard to make the numbers stack up. Our focus is trying to get visitors to come maybe one more time, rather than trying to chase another pound here, another pound there. We're trying to give people experiences so they will visit us again and make extra revenue that way, really.
Okay, excellent.
Chris, can I just add to that?
Please.
So I don't know whether anyone else operates like this, but I run 200 bedrooms across our hotels. All our prices are algorithm orientated, so we can't put through a price increase. So you're only as good as the demand that you can generate for yourself, which means you're only as good as the experience that you deliver when people are with you. So a way of increasing your prices is to make sure that people are having a fantastic experience, because that stimulates demand, which restricts the supply, which in turn raises the price. So I think what I'm saying is that the most crucial thing of anything is just to make sure that you deliver the experience that your customers are expecting, because that's what will stimulate extra revenue for us. And that's the message that I try to get across to my teams all of the time. That's what we've got to do to make the business more successful.
If I can ask Cassie the question for the next one. Again, I know you're now out of the business, but you've seen all the increases coming through on the national minimum wage, national living wage. It's one of the costs that we're always seeing above inflation. Can the sector continue to sustain those above inflation rises?
I don't
Nice
know.
easy question.
Yeah, it's just an easy one. I'm not sure. As a sector, honestly, yes. Hospitality has existed for the whole of the time that humans have had civilization, right? Hospitality will survive. That doesn't mean that individual businesses will, but the sector will. The sector will continue to problem solve, to be creative, to be innovative, to find new ways of doing stuff. And yes, it is absolutely true that the environments that we are operating in have changed, and they have changed dramatically since 2020 in particular. And that's a huge challenge. But I think part of the problem for the industry is that we have a lot of noise of people talking about the industry and because we spoke about, didn't we, going back to the new normal and all of that. And yet here we are 6 years later and it still hasn't settled down. We don't know, we can't really grasp hold of what this world is yet. And I think that therefore what a lot of businesses are doing are just waiting and trying to hope that things go back to how they used to be and they can operate the way they used to be. And I think this is particularly obvious in the pub sector. If you look at actually where growth is in this industry, there's definitely a huge growth in the daytime market, and it's like cafes and coffee shops, they're popping up everywhere and they're really exciting and innovative. Whereas pubs are really struggling because pubs are sitting with this old model and haven't quite worked out how they fit into this modern world, this really fast-paced modern world. In short, it's really tough. But yes, the industry will survive, but that doesn't mean that every single business is going to.
David, if I could ask you this one, and then I'll run to you, Ben. The British Retail Consortium says that the NIC changes, which came on top of all these other costs, has added £6.5 billion to the retail sector's labour costs in 25-26 alone, which has led to the slowing down of recruitment and reducing staff numbers. So with unemployment for 16 to 24-year-olds greater than the national average, is there now a barrier to getting these people into the sector? If I could ask you that, David.
Yeah, to agree with that, our employers' national insurance bill in the last tax year went up by nearly £250,000. So that's never mind the minimum wage. It's a really real figure that hits all of our businesses. I think it does put us off. If I talk to our middle managers, which I think is probably the biggest level within the organisation with the greatest challenge, because they're the people on a day-to-day basis who are managing these people, and they don't necessarily have all of the skills to be able to operate in a new landscape where all of these employment changes have happened. Their action absolutely has always had a reaction, but even more so now than ever, because if you don't manage somebody appropriately, then they're going to be in the organisation and probably cause you more problems. And you do hear words like no more kids. They cost a lot to train, they don't necessarily have all of the skills that an older or more experienced person does. And I think finding the right people who've got that ability to interact within hospitality, who can have a conversation with customers, who can engage with people, is probably the bigger measure as whether you should employ someone or not, rather than necessarily their age. Because there are young people who can still do that, some people can't. But I think historically we'd have put lots of kids in the organisation. We're maybe now a bit more selective.
If I could ask Ben a similar question, how are you finding that? Are you bringing in the youth? Ages now, we're not really able to discuss, but of course we do face this big problem with 16 to 24-year-olds possibly becoming unemployable for the long term. How are you seeing it?
I think it's a real shame in general. I started out my own career dropping out of uni after a year, thinking what I was going to do, and was given that shot, probably because I was quite cheap to employ, all that sort of stuff. And so it's a real shame that there's probably some really amazing young people who are not getting the opportunity, because a lot of businesses, us included, were looking black and white. Should we employ this person who maybe 16, not had a job before, versus someone who's been in the industry maybe 10, 12, 15 years? I'll never forget when my brother came on an apprenticeship at one of the places I worked, and I had to teach him how to mop the floor because he was walking around dragging it across the floor. And it's like, oh my God. I'm stereotyping here, but I was in that position. But those people need more investment in time, and with everything being restricted, I feel like a lot of people are going to miss out, which actually is a real shame for the industry, really.
And the cost differential isn't that great.
No, absolutely.
Between someone with experience and someone not. Last night, Cassie and I went for dinner with Joe and David from the Maid's Head Hotel, and interestingly, we went to a restaurant. I won't necessarily mention it, but they didn't charge a service charge. That was just what I had to ask if they wanted where the service charge was. Gordon Ramsay, I don't know whether you've read this, but he has suggested in one of his restaurants that he's going to add a standard 20% service charge to his restaurant bills. Now, on the basis of the messaging we've had today, the sensitivity of that's putting another 20% on top of the bill, 24% on top of the money that the restaurant desperately needs potentially. I'm going to ask Cassie this question, so she's writing her notes because she didn't want to forget her answer. Do you think this creates a confusing message when we're all turning around saying, actually, the sector needs more money, but the customer only sees one price, which is the total bill?
I think, yes, it does, but I think Gordon Ramsay can do what Gordon Ramsay wants to do. I think that's he's created himself a brand that people will spend money with him regardless. It doesn't even matter if he cooks good food anymore or if he has good service. The people just go because it's Gordon Ramsay. So I think it is not necessarily indicative of the industry as a whole. And also, I think that the reason why he's doing that is not to do with the customer at all. It's not. He knows people will spend money because it's Gordon Ramsay, which is that whole thing. If I go back again to what I was talking about with stand out, people want to spend money with Gordon Ramsay because they buy into his story. That's why they're going to, and therefore they will pay anything. Now, Gordon Ramsay deciding that 20% of what they're paying is now going directly to his staff is so that he can employ good staff and cut everyone else out. He gets first choice of the best people. That's really the purpose. The last business, as I say, I had a 3 rosette restaurant, and when I had a 3 rosette restaurant, it was the only one in the area, and we had literally queues of staff wanting to work for us because we were the only place that they could train, and so we had the best people to choose from. Later in my career, I had a rundown pub that I'd taken over. It'd been closed for 2 years. We took it over. It was in the middle of nowhere. You had to drive a mile out of even the nearest village to get to us. So we were completely remote. And so you had to drive past probably 6 other pubs to get to us. And we were just starting up, and nobody knew whether or not we were going to achieve what we said we were going to achieve. And it was near impossible to recruit people. On top of which, because we're a pub, we didn't get tips. So why are people going to choose to come and work with us? And so really, it's almost a different reason why he's doing that. And it's, yes, from a customer's point of view, it puts the prices up. But again, if you've got customers that love you, they'll pay whatever anyway.
David, you must have lots of customers that love you. But
Don't
what's
get
your
excited on this topic. I think, first of all, so obviously, as probably most of you do, our tips are administered by Trunkmaster because you don't pay employers national insurance if it's bizarrely administered by somebody outside of your organisation. So therefore, the staff have the choice over what they can do and how the trunk is managed. And I really believe that service should be discretionary, and I think that it's up to the staff to deliver the experience, which in turn will deliver the reward from the customer. And I think in a price-sensitive market, in our position, adding 15, 20, 10%, whatever it is, on top of the bill, I think customers are already finding it hard to go out. So why would we put an even bigger barrier in there? Let the staff work their magic and they will get the reward. That's my point of view.
Yeah, I'll just add to what I was saying though. As a customer, I hate service charge being on the bill.
Yeah,
I hate it.
me too. And by the way, I went to a Gordon Ramsay restaurant. It's the only place I've turned around and said, I'm not paying the service charge, you big crap. Just put it on record if you want this to Gordon Ramsay if you want to. So, Ben, so scoring, how worried are you? 8.3 was the score. Regarding the state of the UK economy for the sector. If we go back to 2008 to 2012, when there was the banking crisis and the last recession we could probably properly think and record, tourism in the UK actually grew significantly. Do you think, I'll start with you, Ben, do you think we are being too pessimistic and that actually bad news could be good news?
I think our industry has a lot to be optimistic about with regards to that. I think there's lots of stats over the year that when there's an economic downturn, the last sort of spend to be pinched is that discretionary family days out, hospitality areas. So I feel quite optimistic about that. I think there's lots of businesses who are doing great things, but you also have to do great things. I think the businesses that struggle, as it's been said, will be the ones who are not investing in their people, not investing in their experience, and cutting costs to the detriment of the visitor experience. So I think if you do things really well, are really passionate and believe in what you're offering, I think there's still a lot to play for in that regard. Yeah, absolutely.
Cassie, if I could ask you the same question.
I lost a business in that banking crash of 2008. But I think the reality is that for everyone's bad news, there's always someone doing something great in all of that. And I think that what's so special about this industry is how creative and innovative we are and how we keep adapting to stuff. So I think and as I say, there are businesses even in the most difficult times that thrive. And that's because they have a clear idea of what it is they're trying to do, and they are turning out all of this pessimism and deciding, no, let's focus on our thing. And I think that is a problem for the industry, that we are surrounded by all of this noise, by everyone saying all of this pessimistic stuff. And there's a good reason for that. The trade bodies telling everybody how terrible the industry is because they want to affect change politically. But if we buy into that too much and start having those pessimistic views, then it stops us being creative and being agile and being able to move along with whatever's happening around us.
Yeah. Okay, I'll move on to you, Dave. A similar theme to that, but the question, you can either answer that question or I was going to expand on it and say that we've got some banks in the room today. The pessimism can lead to negativism, can stop the consumer coming out thinking, actually, I'm not going to book that holiday, or I'm not going to book that long term and pay a deposit because it may not be there. And again, that then fills itself, negativity over profitability, negativity over, it doesn't stop investment. I'm not going to go there, they haven't invested. And the banks are then going to turn around and say, well, actually, I'll lend for that investment because you build this theme of constant negativity. What is your...
I think customers are becoming a bit more resilient. I think this is not a new thing, is it? It just is a different issue, and people are probably panicked the first time round, thought about it the second time round, third, fourth, fifth, sixth time round, they carry on a little bit more. We haven't necessarily seen a huge downturn in our business since all of the horrific things that are happening in the Middle East. And if anything, that's presented us with more opportunity. So how do we get people to come and stay with us rather than worrying about going on an aeroplane or not? Let's put more energy into that than worrying about the fact that people may not spend any money. If people don't go out to the pub as often as they used to do before, everybody has a birthday, everybody has a wedding anniversary. Let's focus massively on celebrations and how we add a huge amount of value to those less frequent occasions, but everybody has one. Make sure that they tell everybody about what a brilliant time they had when they came with us. I think I'm always naturally quite an optimistic person. I think in this time I find myself going into optimism overdrive to drown out some of the pessimism, because there is still money out there that people are still willing to spend. We're just going to make sure they spend it with us.
And I think that's really key, because I think that we talk about customers not going out as much, but they are still spending. Hospitality spend is still going up year on year. So our customers have changed how they behave. They might not be going out as often, but when they are going out, they're choosing to spend. And so potentially, they're actually less price sensitive than we think they are. Because when they choose to go out, which might be less often, but then they're spending it all in one visit rather than spreading it out over 7, 8, 9, 10.
Which is important to make it an experience then when they do come.
Absolutely, and it means that where they are spending their money are in the places they love. They're not going to settle for mediocre. No. They're only going to go to the place where they know that their penny is going to be spent really well. So they're not taking chances. These are the opportunities for our industry.
Thank you very much. Okay, I've got more questions, but I've put them down because I think we've got some people in the audience who may want to ask some questions. So does anyone want to ask a question to any member of the panel, or indeed all the members in the panel? Nicholas.
This may be a bit deep, but I'd be interested in all of the panel's view. I've become somewhat obsessed recently with two conflicting truisms. The first being that the natural state of the free market is deflationary. We all compete with each other to produce better value and think about prices of goods, what you can get for those goods over the decades. And yet the system that we all live and operate in cannot allow deflation. 90% of money is lent into existence, comes with an interest rate, and we have to have inflation. In fact, we're all taught in school that deflation is bad, and AI is increasing exponentially the rate of the deflationary pressure that is competing with our inflationary world. What's the panel's view on how we can counteract that?
Wow.
Do you need half an hour to think of it?
I don't know, I think I would say something that's probably completely unrelated to the question that you asked, but I don't think we've spoken about a lot today. So please bear with me, but I think it's related. Is that I don't think we've spoken enough about our staff or about our teams. Because I think in anything to do, whether it's inflationary or deflationary, whether it's more expensive or less expensive, the best thing that we can all do is make our team stronger and more capable to look after our customers. And we put an enormous amount of effort into training and developing and making sure that they can really strike up a key relationship with all of our guests in the hotels and restaurants, because that's what makes them spend more, that's who they buy into, that's who they remember, that's who they talk about. That's what they write about on their review. They don't write about the food necessarily, but they will remember the person who brought it to them or the person that helped them that day. And I just think whether it is about making it more value for money for the guest or trying to charge a higher price, if you get the staff and the service right, you make the right recruitment decisions and they deliver a brilliant experience, you can do whatever you want. You can make it more expensive or you can make it cheaper if you've got that ingredient right. And I probably have not answered your question at all, but I just thought it was worthwhile talking a bit about today.
I think that question can't be answered in this room. I think what it needs is an amazing hospitality venue and a couple of hours and some arguing and a bit of debate, because I think there's a lot of complexity in there and I don't know the answer yet. But I think it's very much a question that is very much worth an opinion. But I do think that for most hospitality businesses, those are the big ideas, but actually what we're running is our own little bit of the world. And that regardless of the answers to those kind of questions, our focus is on our little bit of the world and the influence that we can have on that little bit. And I think that, that creating those places for those bigger conversations.
I thought you were going to mention wine there as well. Is that not required?
I don't drink.
Welcome to 2026.
Yeah. But yes, otherwise, lots of wine, beer.
To be honest, I would just absolutely mince an answer if I tried to answer that question right now. I think, yeah, it's something that I take on board, but I would need to sit in a room and with a glass of wine and consider that.
Thank you for asking. Thank you. Anyone else got a question for the panel? Someone at the back.
We've talked about marketing a lot today. Actually, it's to you, Chris. As an accountant, is there a benchmark about the level of your budget that you should be spending on marketing?
Don't ask an accountant.
No, it was a very interesting conversation that we had with a hotelier recently, not a client of mine, who has just taken in a new management team. And the new management team turned around and said, we're going to go on a commission. So the first thing they did was go through and cut every single spending line that they possibly could, most significantly the marketing. And the owner of the business has now turned around and said they're actually in a meeting today, which is why they couldn't be here, with that management team, gearing back up the marketing spend because they've just cut it too much. You have to market your business. We haven't put it in this year's brochure, but previously the majority of businesses spent 5%, up to 5% of turnover was probably the biggest proportion of businesses. But depending upon where they were in their cycle, whether they were up gearing, whether they were changing what they were doing, whether they were changing with their product, there would be some that would be big spenders, and there would be others that would cut it back because they'd spent the previous year. But I don't think there's a perfect answer because it depends upon where you are in your business cycle and what you're trying to change.
I don't think marketing's ever been cheaper, really. As a 20-year marketeer, if you think about some of the things that you used to have to buy or spend to get your message out there, they cost far more than doing things today, which can be much more organic, can be naturally seeded, can be much more embryonic than having to go on the radio or do something in a newspaper. Or to me, I think you can get a lot more value out of it now than you ever could before.
Yeah, and I guess also social media. I do think that it's a necessary evil, and I think if you can get your customers going on social media talking about their great experience, then there's a guy at the moment going around all the restaurants. I don't know whether any restaurants here that he's been to, but he just goes in there and goes, it's all about the taste. It doesn't matter what he's eating, it's all about the taste. And he's built this sort of following of people who then talk about it's just get people to talk about how good your place is on social media, and then you've got free advertising because people will go with the crowd.
I think in this industry, marketing is all word of mouth. It's just some form of word of mouth, and I think if you remember that, and you remember it's people talking to people and people telling stories, that actually everything else is just the tools in order to do that, then marketing doesn't need to be hugely expensive. But you do need to be very clear about what it is, what stories you're telling, and who you're trying to tell those stories to. And as you say, it can be very organic. And this is back as you say, actually back when we started, the only way of reaching new people was through word of mouth, because we couldn't afford advertising, and advertising actually wouldn't have had any impact anyway. We were too small for advertising. But I just think it's too easy to get very distracted by spending money in order to attract new people, whereas in actual fact you already have customers, and actually doubling down on that and building that and getting repeat visits are really powerful, and giving people stories to tell, giving them a reason to leave and walk out and go and tell someone about you is really powerful and doesn't cost very much. It's actually just about running a good business.
And just coming back to your question about marketing, and there's some destination marketing organisations in here, and I'm a great believer in them. We should all be members of our local destination marketing organisation because they will bring people to the area. We must always remember that while we want our business to grow, we want the area to grow, because if people will come to the area, they will find your business and more people will come. It's a cheaper spend to attract in. And don't forget, Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, we're not competing with each other. We're competing with Cornwall and Devon. We're competing with France. We're competing with Holland. We're competing with the Lake District. It's not about your business. You can spend a lot of money trying to get people to your business. It's people to the area that will really be the success. Sorry, David. David's in chair of an DNO.
Join the Suffolk Coast if anyone's. I was going to say, to add to that as well, I put as much effort into marketing to my staff as I do into my customers, because if I can get 350 people talking about how great our business is, how many people are they going to tell? And I think the biggest mistake you can make is because we run complicated offers and promotions and everything. Our hotels are very close together. They can sell each other, but they've got to know what it is. So communicating to them is just as important as it is communicating to the guests.
Yeah. Ben, do you have a view on marketing and marketing spend? Because you are also part of the Norfolk and Suffolk tourist attractions as well as running Pensthorpe.
Yeah, I think we've been on a whole journey with this. So probably 3 years ago, 4 years ago, drastically cut our marketing budget with this is all my doing, with a view that it would cut costs, all that sort of stuff. And it did for a little while, but we have just doubled down and really invested in our marketing now. We're doing a lot more traditional marketing, so it seems to go full circle again. A lot of parish magazines, leaflet drops, all that sort of stuff. The things that we stopped during COVID. Completely agree with marketing to the team as well. We do internal newsletters, WhatsApp groups, all that sort of stuff. But I also think content is so challenging now and people expect so much more on social media that we have a full-time marketeer who is almost a content creator as well, trying to sell our business with videography, all the things that you would probably have paid an agency for many years ago. And that's really powerful. It's no longer us just walking around with an iPhone trying to do something. It is occasionally, but that gets deleted. So yeah.
What's your one wish for the tourism sector?
I think I'll probably be noble and talk about the county in general in Norfolk. I think looking at the industry here and inbound tourism has been really challenging since COVID. So I would really like to see that staycation boom again. Norfolk being how it was a few years ago and really see the accommodations filling up and all that sort of stuff and create a bit of buzz around the whole industry again. So there's my selfless act for everyone in this room, yeah.
I would go pretty much along the same kind of lines, but about confidence for the industry in terms of just that belief that actually, as operators, you do know more than you think you know, and really it is in your power to be able to make these changes and to be able to do it, and actually just forget some of the noise. Just concentrate on your thing, concentrate on the thing that you're passionate about and the stuff that your customers love about you, and build from that.
I think mine would be to recognise hospitality for the career that it can actually be and have that really recognised as something to be really proud of, the role that you can play in enriching people's lives and that sort of employment status being celebrated and really heroed, because I don't think it always gets the credit that it should.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Positive note to finish on. Well done, Joe.